right. Welcome to the podcast series. This is Alex Koldavsky, CEO of ProTitle USA, One Diligence, and Doc Solution USA. I am super excited today to bring you a special guest, Marlene Robinson, who is a senior program advisor in the Office of Asset Sale within HUD, Office of Housing, Finance, and Budget. In her capacity as the program advisor, Ms. Robinson oversees the sale of FHA single family and multifamily defaulted mortgage notes. With over 100,000 loans sold in the course of the program, valued, I would say, over $50 billion, HUD single family, multifamily, and vacant property sales are a huge part of the capital markets. So, Marlene, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for that introduction. And I am happy to be here with you today to talk about HUD and HUD loan sales, FHA loan sales, rather. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Marlene and I are friends. We met each other a few times at the conferences, and I am super excited for her to be on the podcast. And I wanted to start off with the role of HUD sales in the capital markets and give us a little bit of a history of HUD sales from the prior years, maybe volume results, the goal behind the HUD sales. So I'll let you speak and just go through the history and sort of the goal behind the sales themselves.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with the capital markets piece of it first, because HUD is a pretty large agency, as you know. It's a cabinet level agency within the federal government, and it was created in 1965. Many of your listeners probably already know some of this. It was created in 1965, coming out of the civil rights movement. It has a very, very broad mission, which I wrote down. So, because I want to make sure I get it right, to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. So that's a pretty big, broad mission. So there are many offices within within the department, the agency itself, working towards that mission. You know, we've got community planning and development. We've got the research, a PD&R that does a lot of research. We have that within HUD. The office that deals with fairness and housing, things like that. But in terms of capital markets, there are two offices in particular. That would be Ginnie Mae, the government. The government that Ginnie Mae is the office within HUD that securitizes the FHA mortgages to create more funding in the marketplace to be able to for lenders to be able to lend money for moderate income home buyers. But I work for FHA. So FHA is Federal Housing Administration, and within FHA insures mortgages. So really, we insure the lender against loss. You know, this allows lenders to maybe make loans that some people might consider risky, where for low and moderate income home buyers with a lower down payment, maybe less than a 800 or 700 credit score can still qualify to be able to buy a home, because everybody knows that homeownership is the way to create wealth, in one of the ways anyway to create wealth in the United States. So that's where I work within FHA. And within FHA, of course, we have the Office of Asset Sales. Asset sales is actually within finance and budget. So why is it in financial and budget and not like in one of the other program areas? Because the loan sale program was created, the office was established back in 2001 to sell HUD's defaulted mortgages, and not just for HUD, but I think the government overall, through budget reform, did not want to keep debt on their books, and so agencies were directed to sell debt. And so HUD created the Office of Asset Sales in 2001 to sell FHA's defaulted mortgage loans. And we sell single family, multifamily, and healthcare, because the government insures hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living, and that type of thing, those types of assets. So we were created to sell those assets. The loan sale program actually, though, began in 2005, and they were joint venture loan sale programs between the government, HUD, and the purchaser of those. And so the loan sale program was paused at I think in like 2007, so they could evaluate how it's really working. And in 2010, our then director of the Office of Asset Sales started the loan sales back up, and she dubbed it too small to fail. We were selling like 500 loans or less, something like that. But as everybody can remember, we had the housing crisis that started back in 2008, and by 2012, we had just a glut of foreclosures on the market. And so I think Harvard did a study on this, and I can't quote the specific percentage, but the closer your house is to a foreclosure, the greater your property values will drop. So it just means that um, home, people were losing their homes because of the underwriting standards that were used at the time. Some people couldn't afford the mortgage, and so they were losing their homes. There was just a tremendous amount of foreclosures. And so we stepped in to do two things, because remember our overarching broad mission. Loan sales has an overarching goal, and that is to sell the debt and recover from some of the losses. Bring that money back to the Mutual Mortgage Insurance Fund so that HUD can continue, FHA can continue to insure mortgages on behalf of low to moderate income home buyers. So that's an overarching goal. But we have to balance that goal against the mission, which is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and affordable homes for all. That has to be balanced against that mission. So what we were trying to do when we did all those thousands of loans that you mentioned between 2012 and 20 started up in earnest in 2012 through 2015. We were trying to stem foreclosures by purchasers who bought those loans. They were required to reach non-foreclosure outcomes. The first one meaning keep the borrower in the home if you can. So they were able to do, some of these purchasers of the loans were able to do things that HUD couldn't do, like write down the mortgage, or at that time, those loss mitigation things, write down the mortgage, change the interest rate, work with those borrowers to keep them in their homes. So that was like the first requirement in terms of outcomes to reach some kind of non-foreclosure outcome, deed in lieu, short sale, something like that. Foreclosure was a last resort, because back then we had so many foreclosures and property values were just tanking everywhere. So that was then. Those were forward mortgages. This is now. And now, since 2017, we have been focused on selling home equity conversion mortgage loans, known as HECM. Um, that's HUD's reverse mortgage, FHA's reverse mortgage product, HECM loans. And we've sold about 12,000 HECM loans since that time, since 2017. And the goal of the HECM loans, the reason why we went to HECM is because we just had a tremendous amount of HECMs on the books, and we needed to do something about these HECM loans. So the goal was to bring down that inventory of HECM loans on the books. But we are also today balancing that also against the mission, because HECM is different from forwards. The characteristics of these loans that we're selling is that these due and payable mortgages, these homes are vacant. The borrower has died, and the co-borrowing spouse has also died, and there's no non-borrowing eligible spouse. So we just have a vacant house, and the mortgage that secures that vacant house that's just sitting there, and the heirs have not satisfied the debt. So the heirs are given the opportunity to satisfy the debt. That hasn't happened. So it costs the government about $21 a day or so to maintain and keep these vacant homes just sitting there. So what we're doing now today is we're selling these HECM mortgages. Unlike the forward loans, the resolution for these loans today is foreclosure, because you don't have a borrower there. Okay, there's nobody to really work with to do.
But there's no disputed foreclosure, right? So in other words, the
Yeah,
borrowers are deceased, and it's sort of a process that's new buyers or investors will go through, and that's sort of a uh, a very easy process to go through the right steps to get the property after the sale.
exactly. Yeah. We rep to title, to vacancy, and just anything that will allow the purchaser of the loan to be able to foreclose and enforce that mortgage. Those are the things we rep to with these. But the wonderful thing about these is that, as you know, today we have a different issue in the real estate market with respect to single family properties, in that there's a supply issue, because New York Times did an article on this just last week, I think it was, that many homeowners are just kind of would like to move, but because they're sitting on a 2 to 3% interest rate, they don't want to go into today's market where the interest rate is 7%, prices are higher, and supply is limited. So what we require of our purchasers when they purchase these loans and they foreclose is that the inventory that becomes their REO inventory, they don't get control over every asset because sometimes they lose it at the foreclosure sale. But the ones that become real estate owned REO that they have in their inventory, they now have to hold them open to for they have to have a first look 30-day up to a minimum of 30 days really, or at least 30-day first look period for owner occupant home buyers, nonprofits, and units of local government. So because what we're trying to do with these loans is to expand the supply opportunity for home ownership. And also, we look at once we get the data back from our purchasers, because they have to report back to us on these outcomes that they've achieved, we look to see whether or not any of these houses that they sold could be considered affordable based on the census tract, the price, and we can calculate based on the interest rate in that market at that time. Um,
Marlene,
all the
let
data
me
that
just
we have, we can
understand
figure out whether or not that was an affordable house. So we're
a little.
tracking two things, but really we're trying to utilize the REO to expand homeownership opportunities in a market where there's a limited supply of houses for people to buy. That's what we're trying to do today.
Marlene, let me reiterate on my understanding on what you said. So if the investors would like to invest in the HECM property sales, which is um, the reverse mortgages that are in essence in default status because the borrower and co-borrower are deceased and there's
Mm-hmm.
no redemption by the heirs. In other words, the redemption period expired. If I'm the investor, I would buy that mortgage. I would go through the foreclosure process
Mm-hmm.
and at the discounted rate, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go through the foreclosure process. And then once the foreclosure process is completed, the property is either sold to the investor at the foreclosure auction
Mm-hmm.
or the lender or the investor assumes the ownership of the property and the requirements which is attached to those mortgages upon sale
Mm-hmm.
is to sell those to the first-time home buyers. And there I can probably assume that they can tap into the each state's individual fund for the first-time home buyers that's currently is available through the states or federal government to assist them to buy a home. And they means investors would have to wait a certain time before they open this up to the rest of the buyers. Is
Yes,
that
yeah.
how
So,
you
and
see it?
it's not just the first time home buyer, but it includes first time home buyers. So they will have to take that REO and have an exclusive listing period. We call it the first look period. So they have to have a first look period for it could be a first time home buyer or an owner occupant buyer, someone who wants to live in that house and or a nonprofit who's in the housing space, um, or a unit of local government who might want to buy that house for their, homeless or affordable housing or whatever it is they're trying to do. So they have to have an exclusive listing period for those entities. And only after
They,
that exclusive listing period,
yeah.
when they've given the owner occupant buyers a chance, and no one's bought the house in those categories, then they can sell it to anyone they want to sell it to at that point.
Yeah, so let me follow up with this question. As you mentioned, with the high interest rates, it's very tough to get a mortgage for the first time home buyer, right? Nobody can afford to pay 7.5 and even 8% mortgages. Do you see the number of first time home buyers decreasing on the pools that were recently sold? Do you see the dynamic going one way or the other?
We have looked at some data and we see that because our purchasers are buying the loans at a discount, when they're reselling the homes, in some markets, the homes are very affordable in terms of the PITI and all of that. So we've seen some of that. We know that our nonprofit purchasers are reporting to us that about 50% of their REO inventory is going to an owner-occupant buyer. I don't know if all of those are first-time home buyers or not, but they are going to. And for the for-profit, we see around 30%. So we know that some of these are being sold in article on markets where we consider based on the sale price and the payment and all of that we could reach the conclusion that these could be considered affordable mortgages. And we've also seen that there are quite a bit on the nonprofits side, that about half that's going to owner occupant purchasers. So we're still looking at data. It all of the first look period started with 2 or 3 sales ago. So that data is still starting to come in. So we don't have it all yet, but what we've looked at looks promising. And so we'll continue to look at that data to see, what's really going on, to assess whether or not what we're doing. I mean, we're not selling hundreds and thousands of loans, but we're doing what we can do with the loans that we do sell to try to make a difference.
Understood. And now you mentioned something else here. So you said that pro profits and nonprofits. So HUD vacant property sales are offered in multiple pools where you allow nonprofits to come in and participate. So can you put some color on, you know, what is the sort of a priority bidder for you? How do you treat nonprofits? Why do you offer to investors in sort of separate pools? What is the goal behind it?
Okay, so we started having nonprofits participate back in the 2019. We started in 2017, but beginning with the 2019 sales. And our sales are called HVLS, meaning HUD Vacant Loan Sales, because we just love acronyms, in the government. So everything has to have an acronym. So it's HVLS sales. So HVLS sales really started in 2017, and the first nonprofits came in 2019. And the idea behind bringing nonprofits is that nonprofit works. They work in the local communities. They typically they're very familiar with REO properties. They've been buying REO from HUD for a while on the REO side from single family asset management, and so they work with the low to moderate income home buyer, and we felt like they would have a pulse on that, and their mission is to help in that space. So that's why we brought nonprofits in. Initially, we were allowing them to buy 10% of the loans that we offer. But today, we call the nonprofit bidders priority bidders, and we call the bidding status that they get priority bidding status. And every other bidder, the for-profit, is called an eligible bidder. So today, nonprofits can purchase up to 50% of the loans that we're selling. They can bid on everything, but we award up to 50%. And to win those, they get to cherry pick which loans they want. And we don't sell these loans. We were selling in pools, but we found out from the analysis that we did that if purchasers bid each loan individually, we recovered a little bit more money. So we just have all the loans, just one big pool, although we do kind of group them in geographic areas for those purchasers who might be a West Coast buyer versus East Coast or the South, so they can see, where the assets are. But they bid each individual loan, so nonprofits can bid up to 50%. They can bid everything, but they can be awarded up to 50%. And we award them they have to meet or exceed our reserve price. And our reserve price is the price that internally, we don't share it with anybody, that we set, because the alternative to selling the note is to foreclose. So we look at what would we recover if we were to go to foreclosure on this. And that we work with the Office of Risk Management, and they're the ones who really set the reserve price. So nonprofits just have to meet that reserve price, and they can win. And they're competing against other priority bidders. We do a first round of evaluation of the bids to see who the nonprofit winners are. They have to win a minimum of 5 loans to be awarded any loans. And then the for-profits, or the eligible bidders, After that first round, they compete for everything that's left that we're not going to award to nonprofits, and they have to, of course, give us the best price, and they have to win at least 20 loans to be awarded. We don't award for less than 20, so you have to win, be the high bidder on at least 20 to win. And yeah, so that's kind of like how we do it today.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. Just to reemphasize the point that the highest bid might not necessarily win if this is a priority bidder that is more qualified to get the loan, right? So
Yeah,
I guess the first look is for the priority bidders by HUD, while
yes.
the eligible bidders can be higher bid, but might not get the all the loans just because of their status, right?
Yeah, because the first round we evaluate the nonprofits first, and the nonprofits go through a little bit more stringent of a qualification process. They have to complete the regular qualification forms that all bidders complete, but they also have additional housing mission certifications because the nonprofits are not just any nonprofit. They have to be a nonprofit with a housing mission, or it could be a local government with a housing mission. The nonprofit could be a partnership between two nonprofits or a nonprofit with a local government or a local government or a nonprofit by themselves. 501(c)(3). So, but they have to have a housing mission, and we look at some of their 1023 and their 990 codes from the IRS. They have to have been in this space doing what they do for at least they should have gotten their letter from the IRS, their designation as nonprofit at least 2 years before, like the bid day, um, at the time, 2 years before the time that we're qualifying them. So they have to fill out more forms and they go through a little bit more, uh, somewhat, I wouldn't say stringent, but there's a little bit more of a hurdle for them to get qualified as a priority bidder.
Marlene, so let's. It sounds like to be eligible bidder, there's easier process. And let's say somebody that's watching our podcast or this video says, "Oh, I really want to bid or become eligible to bid on the uh, Hackham auction." How long does the process take? What do they have to worry about? Any documents? Any requirements? I heard that you have to have at least a $3 million net worth. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah, that's
who would
actually.
qualify? Mhm.
Yeah, that's really the 3 million is for the nonprofits and it's 5 million for the for-profits. But it's a certification process for eligible bidders and nonprofits too for certain things. The qualification form, they are self-certifying to everything. So we don't go out and check to see that you have a $5 million net worth. You are certifying to everything, and then at the end you sign something saying everything I said certified to in this form is true and correct. Okay? So, but the process to qualify is really very simple. It's not really complicated. We have a transaction specialist that helps us to execute these loans, and it's Falcon Capital Advisors. So if you go to Falcon, Falcon, falconassetsales.com, falconassetsales.com, there should be a link on their website to tell you about the loan sales and how to qualify and all of that. But bidders will certify, and now we don't even take the deposit up front. We have a new process because we have like sometimes 50, 60 bidders. I think last sale we had like 72 bidders to qualify, and
Wow.
30 of them might BTAF, meaning they've completed a bid term acknowledgement form. When a bidder completes a bid term acknowledgement form, that signals to us that they really intend to bid. Some people qualify and they get in the data room and they just look at the data and they're like kicking the tires and they're shopping around and they're looking, but they don't really become a buyer. So we have about maybe 30 that BTAF, and those are all these deposits. So it's a big administrative work on our end, keeping track of the deposits, and for the non-winners, returning the deposit and all of that. So now bidders have to certify that they have the money, and that when if they become a winner, that they are ready to queue up a deposit when we call them, but we don't take the deposit up front. So really, the qualification process is really very simple. And any questions that you have, we have a Phil Thick pen with PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's a subcontractor to Falcon. He helps to market the sales out there for us and answer bidder questions about qualification. So he's somebody that a bidder could reach out to if they have questions. They can do that through falconasetsales.com on how to reach him. But anyway, that's our qualification process. You have a qualification form that you complete. It's an OMB form, and you certify to everything, and you sign and all of that. And yeah, you then get once we review everything and everything looks good, you then get a code, some kind of bidder ID code that allows you to go into the data room once the data room's open to look at the attributes for the loan and we put out a lot of information. We put out BPOs, internal BPOs inside. Some states we have to do appraisals because they don't allow for BPOs in some states, and in places where we can't get a BPO, which is very few, but occasionally there are one or two places that's just the BPO provider can't get there, we will get an AVM. So those we provide that. We also provide inspections because these houses are vacant. So HUD has an inspector to go out every 2 weeks to maintain and inspect the property, and they take photos, and we provide those inspections along with other data, the title and the title information, other collateral data that people that we need. So bidders get a chance to go in the data room, look at the data to determine whether or not they want to bid on
And
any of
and
these
and
loans.
Marlene, they do have the loan by loan data tape,
Yes,
which they can download and decide which loans individually they would
yes,
like to bid. And
yes,
also for folks that are watching this video, it's very important to understand that when HUD assumes the HECM loan, they get the assignment from servicers or from the investors, and those are clean loans. They have to be super verified. The
yes,
title policy should be as a part of the transaction. The HUD will not sell the loans without redemption period expiring, so there's no need to worry about the probates or heirs claiming the right to the property. And
exactly.
it's really a very solid, safe investment. So from the perspective of reps and warrants, what does HUD reps for on those properties?
Not with the forward, there was much more in the way of reps and warrants, but with HECM, definitely to title, definitely to vacancy, um, anything that will allow you to enforce that mortgage and be able to foreclose is what we rep to on the HECM loans. Okay, so we have a repurchase process. So if we rep to something, we don't rep to condition. Um, you
Right.
know, we don't rep to physical condition. But if you buy it and you're expecting a house and it turned out to be vacant land and you don't want to keep it, we can repurchase that. Or if you buy it and it was a house in the photo in the BPO, but there was a fire between the time you made your bid and settlement and it burned down, um, and you say, yeah, I want the land, I want to, but in that case, you can ask a HUD to repurchase that. And so there are certain instances where we will repurchase. We don't repurchase for a lot of reasons, but that those are some of the reasons why we would maybe take back the note if something went AWOL. But we rep to anything that will allow you. I don't know every laundry list of it right now, but we definitely title, definitely vacancy, and definitely anything that will allow you to be able to enforce that mortgage and be able to foreclose, because we know that foreclosure is the disposition option, the resolution for these loans themselves before you can control them. The purchaser of the note can control the property. So we don't want anything getting in the
Understood.
way of that.
So Marlene, what are the sort of common mistakes that folks do when qualifying? Is there something that you can recommend for them to avoid doing to expedite the process?
What Getting back to nonprofits, because they have a bigger the not I shouldn't say nonprofits, but priority bidders, they have a bigger hurdle. Another thing that I didn't mention is that they also have to give us like a what do you call it, an organizational chart so we can see their board of directors and if they have funding partners, who those are, and all of that. So on the eligible bidder side, we don't see too many issues with qualifying, not too many mistakes that eligible bidders make. The biggest problem we have sometimes with eligible bidders is they wait till the last minute to send in. They decide they want to bid, but they're waiting until the last minute to send the documents that they need to complete, like the BTAF and the they don't have to do the they don't have to do, they still have to complete a form about the deposit and some other forms. And sometimes we get those a day before bid day. And so we urge bidders not to do that because it puts a lot of pressures on us. And we're going to start putting some deadlines on these things so that we can get them earlier. So, or sometimes a bidder will send their bidder qualification documents the day before bid day. And it's like, come on, you know. So, but in terms of the completing the forms themselves, we don't see very few. I haven't really heard about any issues. We see more issues on the priority bidder side because it's a lot more forms to complete. We have to look at their org chart, look at their structure and things like that. We have to look at their housing mission, and sometimes they might not include that, or they didn't check the right box, or they don't have their nonprofit letter that they got from the IRS with their nonprofit status, things like that that we see with them. But a big thing that we do see do, and the other thing is sometimes, and we've tightened up on this, bidders want to change their settlement date from the agreed upon. We settle 60 days after the bid day, and it's an agreed upon settlement date. So we don't pick the date. We work with you to set it, and then bidders will send an email saying they're not ready to settle for one reason or another. And so we are servicing these mortgages. We're holding them. We expect to transfer them to you on a particular date. So now we're charging a fee for that for however many days. We'll give you the time, but we are going to cover our cost for doing that.
Do they
So,
have, Marlene, do they have to line themselves up with the servicer and, custodian? Is there anything that they need to look ahead for and create the ecosystem? I mean, I can tell you that my firms worked with every buyer of the Hackham sale
hmm,
on the title, doc
hmm,
prep, and recording side.
okay,
So all my three companies are pretty much involved because we're experts in Hackhams, right?
hmm,
We work with all the servicers. We work on the assignment to HUD side
hmm,
for the pretty much all the reverse mortgage servicers. So
okay,
we're experts, right? And therefore, on the other side, sort of we apply our expertise on diligence when you sell the loans. But from the investor perspective, outside of say using us on doc prep and recording or release of HUD loans or title segments, um, what else do they need to align themselves with? Servicer, is that, do they have to
yeah, they
register with?
absolutely, and the eligible priority bidders are new to this, a lot of nonprofits, and they don't buy necessarily a lot of loans, so they have a difficult time sometimes finding a servicer that's willing to service 5 loans or 6 loans. So HUD will be like working with them in the future, not the priority bidders, to provide some training on asset management, servicing, and how to select a servicer and things that they need to watch out for. But all bidders should have their servicer lined up. um, yeah, because our interest in the loan is going to end when we transfer it over to you on that servicing transfer date. Everything is going to be a done deal. And so we want to be ready to just turn everything over. So absolutely, that's one of the big thing. And we find that sometimes new players, not the big players who are used to buying loans, but somebody who's new to the space, they might not have a servicer, or they're finding their servicer after they've won the loans. That's and and I think that feeds into them not sometimes not being able to close to come to settlement timely because they're still working that out. So you need to have your servicer lined up who's going to help you manage these assets, you know. Anything else that you need to do to be able to take control of this inventory of notes that you're buying. We need to know where to send the documents, things like that. Um, once we go to settlement. So it's very important that they have that. And I'm glad you brought that up. Very important that they have that servicer lined up because we do see situations where purchasers don't. And it's best to do it before. be doing those while you're qualifying and going through all that, be lining up all your team members that you'll need to help you with that.
Yeah, what's important to understand is there's only a very limited amount of servicers that service HECM loans. So it's a long onboarding process, and with the at downshift in the market and a lot of headwinds, servicers are cutting staff, and
Mm,
they don't have a lot of resources to onboard you. So you really, as an investor, have to plan ahead and make sure that either you would onboard yourself with the reverse mortgage servicer, you
mhm.
qualify them. Is there a list of services that HUD recommends, or
No, we don't really
it's the
recommend
usual
any
suspects?
servicers, but if we have a list on the HUD.gov, we'll just say, these are the servicers, and then each purchaser will have just to go and work out servicer. We have invited some servicers like Fay Servicing to our conferences when we do them for nonprofits, because we know that Fay will work with a nonprofit who buys like less than 10 loans. They're one of the servicers who are willing to work with the small buyer like that. And so we're not recommending them, but we know that they do it. So we will invite them to talk about what they do and how they work with nonprofits. But we don't really like specifically recommend any particular servicer.
Understood. Um, so let's switch for a tiny bit to sort of outcome for the sale, right? So let's say the new investor comes in, they do a diligence on the assets, they close within 60 days per the settlement dates, they align themselves with the servicer and custodian, and they end up um, going through the foreclosure. And of course, they have to line themselves with the foreclosure attorney firms that are capable of foreclosing on the HECM loans. They get to the sale. They either sell to first-time home buyers or government entities, or the they assume the ownership themselves. How do they report back, right? What's the post-sale requirements, and how often do they have to report?
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you, Alex. So they have to report to us quarterly. So we give them a reporting schedule in their CAA, and I might as well mention the CAA, the Consignment Assumption Agreement. I always get it mixed up, but it's the CAA is the contract, the purchasing contract between HUD and the purchaser, the CAA. So in that CAA, we'll lay out Consent Assignment Assumption Agreement. Anyway, we'll lay out um, the dates that they'll have to report. So we tell them. So reporting won't start immediately because, like you said, like you were explaining, they have to onboard, they have to go through, a certain process. So we'll tell them when reporting will start. I think it usually starts 6 months after settlement date or something like that. But every quarter after that, they will have to submit a post, what we call a post sale report. And in those post sale report, they're telling us two things. They're telling us the disposition status of the loan, where you are with the disposition of the loan. So they might say that it's still in servicing, default servicing, or they foreclosed on so many, or they were able to, on a few of them, they're able to do deed in lieu or short sales because they can work with the heirs to work those things out. And so they didn't actually have to go to foreclosure. So they give us that disposition status. And then for the ones that come as REO in their REO inventory, they have to now report to us the mission outcomes that we want to see. How many of those you sold to an investor? How many were sold to an owner occupant? Report if you sold it to an owner occupant, was it affordable? Would you say that was an affordable in terms of the payment for the owner occupant in the market that you sold it in? Was it affordable? Was it a first time home buyer? We don't all of these census type information, they would then report back to us on their post sale report. And that's quarterly. And then we look at that data quarterly. And then we run, we have a compliance contractor to look at all that. And the compliance contractor will select some loans to validate what the purchaser has said. So if a purchaser said, I sold this on occupant and it was affordable, then we request some documentation. So purchasers are required per their CAA to retain documentation that supports these outcomes that they're reporting back to us. So whether it's the HUD one that they're retaining or whatever documentation in their CAA, there's an exhibit called Exhibit H1, and the last column of it has some examples of the types of documents that they are to retain. It could be a certification signed by the borrower of, the person who's buying the house, saying, yes, I intend to own or occupy this house. But we right now we don't ask for documentation for every loan, just a sample. We'll pick a representative sample of outcomes to validate and to look at the documentation. But going forward in the future, we may be validating 100% of the sale to owner occupants, just to make sure, because right now we feel the sample size is kind of small and we're not getting a good sense of it. And for some purchasers, the validation rate has been very low. And so we're working to try to improve that, meaning that the documentation they gave us, um, the documentation they provided didn't support the outcome that they said, or just two things didn't go together. So that's how we look at outcomes to see if we're really meeting those mission objectives that we would like to meet. And of course, we can always, based on the outcomes, tweak what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Understood. Yeah. Um, so really, it's important to maintain the good documentation for submission in the future. And I'm assuming that HUD is giving a certain, I guess, points or priority increase in the future bidding if the buyer of prior sales had performed and fulfilled HUD objective.
Yeah, that would be, we haven't gotten to that point yet. But it'd be nice to have a purchaser scorecard, honestly. And I've been talking about
Yeah.
this for a while now. If for anything else, our purchasers can see against other purchasers, and maybe those purchasers who really are meeting those mission outcomes, maybe some of those purchasers can get, I want to use the word priority status since that's already applicable to the nonprofits. So those are things that we're looking at, although we're not quite there yet with that. But we'll see what the future brings with all of that. But I do believe that me personally, not speaking on behalf of HUD, that the people who are really performing and doing it well should get more opportunity to do it and do it well. Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. So we went through the whole process of qualification, um, due diligence, foreclosure, and post-sale requirements.
hmm
Let's touch on what's upcoming for the
Okay.
vacant property sales, right? So what do you see as far as future sales? And I know one is upcoming. Maybe you can say something about that one, right? It's on 5/7 on May
Yeah, May
7th.
7th. Yeah.
And how many sales do you plan this year or maybe in the future?
Yeah. Yeah. So on May 7th, we're having a sale. So if you're listening and you're excited, I hope you are, we're selling roughly 1,260 due and payable HECM mortgage loans in that sale. Our top states are Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania. Where else? Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania,
Could
New
be Florida
Jersey.
too.
And Florida. Yeah, I think Florida's on there. So those are our top five states. California. I think Florida's not in there this time. It's California. Usually it's California, Florida, and Texas, but for some reason I
Yeah.
don't know what's going on with Florida. But so those where but we have loans all over the country, but those are the top five. And so the bidding time is going to be Tuesday, May 7th between 10 a.m. Eastern time and 1 p.m. So that's and we started it at 10 to give the West Coast bidders, so they don't have to get up too early to place their bids. Um, what else can I tell you about that? So if you want to
I'm actually
qualify
very
again,
happy that you didn't say New York because New York foreclosures are taking a long time, and
really,
it's year and a half. Staten Island is completely dead, quiet. So I'm glad you didn't say New York. So it's good for the investor not to see New York in the portfolio.
yeah. So anyway, if you want to bid, you go to falconassetsales.com. I mentioned that before, to register and go through the whole process. Um, as far as that's upcoming. We typically do around two HECM sales every fiscal year. So we are, if you see our sales are advertised, you'll see HVLS, like the current sale is HVLS, meaning HUD Vacant Loan Sales 2024-2. That means that that sale occurred in the fiscal year of 2024, and it was the second sale of the fiscal year. So that's what those numbers mean. So we typically do two uh, single family loan sales, right now, HECM sales, and then two multifamily healthcare loan sales, which you haven't talked much about, but that's on the commercial side. Um, Sometimes we do three HECMs and one, so somewhere between two and four sales a year. It's hard sometimes for us to just put out the calendar. We're more consistent with HECMs than the commercial side because we're not seeing many defaulted multifamily assets. And the ones that do come in, most of them end up going to foreclosure because HUD has some tremendous leverage when they foreclose and requirements that they can put on the purchaser of that multifamily property. So if it was an affordable housing property, it is to remain affordable housing according to the regs. And so purchasers may have to adhere to certain requirements. And it's easier to do that on the foreclosure side than it is on the note side. So we don't see as many. Typically, when we sell a note for a multifamily assets, is what we call a 221D4. That's a program under which it was insured, and that's a market rate. It was insured to be a market rate property. And if it has remained that way, meaning people in the market can afford these rents, then you might see it in a loan sales. But over time, markets change, and the market might be so tight now that the people occupying, or the occupants of that property might be paying a lower rent than what it is in the market right now, and HUD would want to protect them. So to offer, HUD can also offer vouchers and other tenant protections when they foreclose on a multifamily that they can't offer when they're selling a note. So we
Well,
don't
Marlene,
really
so,
see a
so
lot of the
let
multifamilies anymore.
well, let me just jump in. Yeah, it's fascinating because not a lot of people, at least the ones that I talk to, my clients, my investors, they know about multifamily and especially healthcare sales by HUD. I think they're also offered through Falcon, right? Capital
Yes,
Advisors
Falcons,
or
yeah.
Mission, right? But what I noticed is you sell defaulted loans on things like nursing homes and hospitals, and to me,
Yes.
that's bizarre because it should be a booming business for hospital and for nursing home to pay their bills, and they are not. So, can you comment on that? What do you see in that inventory? And that's fascinating to me because
Yeah.
I don't think investors are well aware that you're running those sales.
So a lot of what we're seeing had to do with the pandemic. During the pandemic, many of these smaller nursing homes and assisted living facilities had problems paying their bills, or changes in Medicare sometimes, how Medicare makes payments. Sometimes it's a group home situation where the state would allow like a institutional facility, group home type of thing for people with, certain disabilities and what have you. And now they've changed it to put them more in community settings, and they don't want like an institutional type settings. So there are like a variety of reasons, but a lot of the ones that we're seeing coming in right now. We're planning a sale for August, and we're going to have some anywhere between 17 to 20 nursing home assisted living facilities. Most of them are assisted living facilities, really, and that had a lot to do with the pandemic. During the pandemic, some of these assisted living facilities didn't have the money um, to pay their bills, and a lot of the defaults that we're seeing is somehow related to they fell behind during the pandemic and they weren't able to catch up or come out of it post pandemic. Sometimes it's the operator. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with the facility itself, but the operator. Some of these are sometimes operated by families. And the operator, the longtime operator, might have passed away, and now the family members come and take it over and they don't know how to run it. And so we're having operator problems, and they don't know how to manage it, because it's real estate, but it's also a business, you know. There's a combination of a lot of reasons why you see these types of assets go into default. So some of the ones we sell are occupied, and we're looking for, well, when we market it, we're not necessarily looking for, but we market to operators who might want to come in and take it over, and they're buying the loan at a discount, so it gives them some room to go in, and if the operator's still there, the owner's still there, and they want to keep it, it gives them some room to work with them, or they can get it running and bring in a whole new operator and sell it, resell it. We've seen some of the disposition, the resolution to these be that they get it running again and they sell it to an operator who wants to buy it. Some of them are vacant because the state might have moved everyone out, especially if it wasn't being properly managed, and put them in other places, and now we have a vacant facility. And sometimes it's in a market where there's nothing else out there, and it just didn't work for that. So some of them have been put to alternative use, like purchasers will buy them and they'll be turned into drug treatment centers, and um, centers for people with mental health issues, community centers. We have one purchaser who will buy them in the middle of nowhere, and then he runs a nonprofit, and he turns them over to the community that then refurbish them as community centers, the ones that are put to some sort of alternative use. So sometimes they've been put to alternative use as housing, affordable housing, depending on where they are. They've been turned into college dormitories if they're close to a campus, things like that. So, it's very creative what purchasers who buy these assets, what they do with them, but there are a myriad of reasons why they go into default.
Is the registration and post-sale requirements the same as the HACMs and single family?
There are no post-sale requirements on commercial assets. Once we sell it, it's yours. Goodbye. No. Um,
Yeah.
but there are no post-sale requirements on the commercial assets. And we sell the loan, and yeah, yeah.
And what
Different
about
for
the
single family because we're
registration
talking about
process?
housing. Whereas,
You
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, 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 no problem. The registration requirement, right? So we talked about the 3 million net worth for nonprofits, 5 million for eligible bidders. What about net worth requirements for registering to bid on multifamily and healthcare?
It's the same thing on multifamily. It's $5 million. One thing we do, I mean, with a commercial, one thing we do before when we have a multifamily asset, the program office will reach out to the local government first to see if the local government might be interested in, if we foreclose and can transfer if HUD is a high bidder at the foreclosure, we could transfer the asset to the local government to maintain affordable housing. Because with multifamily, it's always about maintaining affordable rentals. So we do that first, but the requirement for to bidding on multifamily is I think it's the $5 billion net worth, and yeah, then it's the same kind of certification process as single family. So the process for qualifying is pretty much the same. Sometimes with multifamily, we might do a direct sale of the note, a non-competitive sale of the note to a nonprofit or unit of local government. So it all depends with that. But competitively, you fill out your form, you certify to your net worth, whatever the requirements happen to be. I believe it's $5 million for commercial bidders, and then you're able to bid on those loans. And the closing process is very simple on that one. We usually close those within 2 weeks of the bid
Oh,
date.
wow.
Yeah, so because people are buying a single asset or a couple of assets, 4 or 5, it's not like single family. It's not multi-millions of dollars in some cases. Uh, you know, uh, so we usually close those very, very quickly.
And any sort of disclosure on rent controls of what HUD would like to do with the multifamily by keeping the rates low on some of the, say, affordable housing or low income housing? That's all disclosed in the material that you.
Yes, and if there are any requirements put on the purchaser, Usually that's done on the foreclosure side, but if we on the note sale side say we've sold some multifamily where we say that you can't raise the rent for 2 years. You can't evict anybody for 2 years. There's some requirements that the lawyers would put in. We may monitor that just to make sure that that's happening, but usually there's no reporting and really real monitoring going on that side. Usually we sell it and we're done with that. Yeah.
Understood. Marlene, I think we are coming to the end of the podcast, and
Okay.
if I am an investor, I'm extremely excited. You gave so much valuable information to go and call for action to register and take a look at the assets. If I'm an investor, I'm looking at this opportunity as a no-brainer because you don't require the deposit. You require a net worth certification, and you are, as HUD representative, would love to see more and more people to register and have a much higher participation rate in all the auctions, including multifamily and healthcare, just to be able to resolve things better, quicker, and I think that creates a velocity for HUD as well. So I really wanted to thank you so much for
You're
great
welcome.
information, sparked that much interest for many investors that are currently sitting on the sidelines waiting for foreclosure market to pick up, and it's not there. And they're
Right.
looking to enter the market. And I think bidding on HUD vacant property sales, SFR sales on multifamily is a great way to get in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk about loan sales. Appreciate you having me. And yes, I do encourage if you're interested, you want to know more. Uh, we also have videos that we've done on training for nonprofits, but there's a wealth of information there. We just did one recently that any bidder, because what we're telling the nonprofits is what we would tell any bidder. So there's additional resources out there. So if you're interested, go to falconassetsales.com, or you can reach out to me at HUD, and we'll be happy to share more information to tell you more. And I encourage investors to look at this product. No matter whether you're a priority bidder or eligible bidder, all bidders have to meet the outcome goals of our sales. But that to me, that's a relatively easy lift.
Sounds good. Marlene, thanks again.
Thank you, Alex. Have a great day.